All right. Sorry, we've had some technical problems. Our internet just dropped for a second, but I do believe we are back. Our next presentation will be from Bo from the M&T SIG. So Bo, when you are ready, you can share your screen.
It should be, is it not sharing now?
Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay, perfect. All right, thanks, Bo. You can take it
Can
away.
you see the slide?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, this is the Method and Tools SIG group report for the past year, October of 23 to 24. And I am Bill Barrett, the SIG leader. Let's see. Okay. Looks like there's missing material. Is there everything on this slide showing up? Let's see, I'm not seeing everything. It has a list of members here.
It's white area.
Yeah, we've got a white square on the screen. I'm not sure
Yeah.
why.
You have the presentation, don't you, Kyle? Do you want to share that
Let
from
me do
your
that.
end? And that way, you got it in the room.
Oh. Just give me 1 second.
So that slide, while Kyle's finding it, showed the SIG membership, which is myself, Michael Havlinka, Brian, Research and Engineering, and Jasper. And then our meetings, we basically meet just about every Tuesday at, well, 10 o'clock my time, which is Eastern Time US, 1600 in Central Europe, and it's 9 in the morning for Michael. You can go to the second slide. And then we do also have a joint call with the Interop SIG monthly, going over issues like certification, the document framework that we're talking about, those types of things. And if you're interested in getting engaged here, you can email either myself or Kyle, and we'll get you invited to the calls and join in. Next slide shows our charter. It's unchanged from last year. I believe last year we added a bullet on working with the Interop SIG on testing specifications. I don't see that one here. So anyhow, I'll have to double check that one. Go on to the next slide. For the past year, we've been working on COBIA maintenance, development, and testing. We've made one maintenance release of phase 2 COBIA. We're releasing COBIA phase 3. Jasper, you presented on that this morning, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so hopefully I don't have any questions on phase 3. It's been released as a beta. It's out and getting some limited testing at this point. We also have a COBIA threading or a CAPE-OPEN threading guidance that was published on the CO-Lan website. We worked to update the archival information template for the document. I'll show a little bit about what we did there. And then also the interaction with Interop SIG on support for certification testing and versioning, and developing some test specifications for the utilities and persistence interfaces. Next slide. Okay, so our COBIA roadmap, we've, phase 1 was done a number of years ago. We've completed the phase 2 work, and the phase 3 release that's Jasper talked about is compatible with what's in phase 2. And the maintenance of Cobia, we're moving all of the maintenance into phase 3, and basically phase 3 is now going to be the main branch of Cobia going forward, and that provides the cross-platform and interoperability. The beta release of phase 3 includes the marshaling. I know we've talked in the past about language bindings and remoting. We're still looking for justification there. We need to put together a logging interface, and I'll talk a little bit more about that going as we move forward, but we've got a idea of what we want logging to be able to do. And then, of course, the maintenance of that is ongoing. And then phase 3 is going to be the documentation of our phase 4 is documentation, which is future work to be done here. And then go on to the next slide. What's grayed out here are the things that we have delivered, which is the marshaller and the optimized transport. This year's work involved getting the on-the-fly proxy generation done, which is using libfi, along with custom interfaces, enabling custom interfaces, and COM interop for custom interfaces. All of this work in the work package 1 has been completed and is undergoing its final beta testing prior to full-scale release. Next slide, please. So with the release of Cobia phase 3, we're merging all of the code into the phase 3 code repository. This essentially ends phase 2 as a ongoing product. That means all bug fixes and updates are going to be provided in phase 3. However, we do maintain backward compatibility with phase 2 for things that have not been updated yet to phase 3. Okay. The beta version is out. It's being tested. In and out of process marshaling is in there. There is a generic TCP/IP marshaller. It can be expanded for use as a remoting tool. The biggest issue there is secure transport mechanism. We haven't put that in place. Some ideas around SSH, I think it is, that we're looking at as possible mechanisms there for securing that so that things can go out over the wire instead of just being internal, if you will. Okay. So the pre-compiled proxies are there for the Cobia interfaces, and then on-the-fly proxies are being generated for custom interfaces. We're planning a full release of this this month. If we get any feedback, we will address any comments on that. So next slide. As we got to this point of preparing this presentation, it occurred to me we're now moving beyond these phases of Cobia, and Cobia is now its own thing, no longer phase 3 or phase 2 or what have you. Okay, so the development is largely complete. We've demonstrated the cross-platform interoperation. Linux, it's been compiled and run on Ubuntu. It can currently be compiled from source, which is available to CO-Lan members. GTK3 is required for GUI under the current implementation. And then we're looking at developing a Debian RPM type package that can be distributed as a Cobia package. This is supported across most of the Linux distribution and package managers out there. So hopefully this is a route to getting it out into Linux. Mac, it has been demonstrated that we can compile and run Cobia within the Mac operating system. We just don't really have anybody within the SIG that's using a Mac framework on a Mac on a regular basis. So, we don't know exactly how to move forward in the Mac OS realm. Open tasks, language bindings, and remote computing. Again, we're kind of looking for a business case here. I think the remote computing can be done relatively easy. Where we are with the TCP/IP, we just have to secure it, maybe do a little bit of front end on that to make some of the, develop some sort of maybe an interface that would allow you to connect, to provide the information needed for the remote connection, right? And then logging, we know that that's something that needs to be part of this. We're making a proposal to the management board. So we do want to move forward in that way. Ongoing maintenance and the documentation is next steps that we're going to be working on, but those really aren't, these are now giving life to Cobia, not just uh, developing Cobia. It's moving to the next step, which takes me to my next slide, where we're talking about what's our path forward with Cobia. We need to develop some kind of a community of users for Cobia. The goal here is to expand the development and maintenance into the developer community. You guys as the software vendors, users of this software now need to start to take ownership, take a leading role in helping us define this thing going forward. We need to engage uh, academics, government, industry, people on what we can do with Cobia, how it can be used. It'll help us identify and debug issues and devise, a path forward for this thing. So, what we're looking at is trying to find ways to disseminate this, develop trainings, case studies for use cases for Cobia, develop some how-to and example documents. So, we're looking for feedback here, looking for people that want to get involved with this going forward to help us advocate for this package. All right. So that's our thoughts at this point. Next slide, please. The threading model. I think, Jasper, you probably discussed this as part of your presentation this morning. So, there's two basic threading models. There's a link for the model on the website. The two threading models are the default model and then the restricted threading model. Restricted threading model looks a lot like apartment threading in COM. Okay. What we did want to have is a flexible, modern approach to multi-threaded applications, identify who's responsible for synchronization, minimize our need to marshal calls, and of course, we still have to interoperate with COM. Jasper will, as I said, Jasper will be presenting those details. Next slide. So, as far as logging goes, like I said, this is something that we know we have to be able to deliver as part of Cobia. It's going to be essential to helping us move forward in interoperability. Okay, so we're going to take a little bit of a different approach from Colt and basically try to do what we wished we could have done with Colt in a large way. Okay, so and we want to have something that can be adapted and flexible and meets the needs of the community. Okay. So we're going to have logging implemented. If you want something to be logged, it'll be part of an API call or an environment variable that will allow you to access the logger. Okay. Cobia is going to allow us to have direct access to objects, very similar to what we have with marshaling. You're basically going to be using the tear-off type interfaces of the object being marshaled, and it's really going to look like the logging tool is going to essentially be just like a marshaller. It's going to stick in the middle of the calls. It's going to give us the information that we need from the calls to be able to log everything. So basically any method on a Cobia interface, whether it's a precompiled interface or a custom interface, is going to be able to be logged. Default output for the log is going to go directly to a file. There'll be a default location, but you can modify that with an environment variable within the system. Okay. We're also proposing a log sync type event type interface that'll allow an application to listen to the Cobia log as it's being generated. That way, something like a PME can display the log in real time as you're going through it. You can watch for calls, specific types of calls, and see whether or not that call is being implemented, or what's happening in that call. Possibly put a debugger breakpoint within that call, using the logging system, and get access to it. You know, we feel that this is going to be the easiest path forward. It's going to give us everything that we're going to want. It's going to work just like the marshaller, which the code for that already exists. So just think about a marshaller spitting out logging information as it's happening. It also shouldn't have much overhead because it's basically a pass-through call with a little bit of extra work. I'll open up to questions in a couple of slides here. So let's go to the next slide, which is the test case specifications. We're developing test cases for the common interfaces. We own those. So anyhow, we're still working on this a little bit. I know that we're kind of lagging on this one. Next slide. Manager interfaces. These were released back in last December. It's using basically a factory pattern, design pattern, similar to what's used in the property package manager, to allow you to create primary PMC objects using a standard workflow, and it allows creation from persistence. You can do some subclassing of your unit operations and other PMCs, primary PMCs, based upon a template, and you can store these various variations of the PMC, and they don't have to be, the variations don't have to be registered as long as they're known to the manager. Okay. So, and then that way these things are available across all of our different PMEs that implement or that use the manager interface. So anyhow, let's go on to the next slide. And this is anticipated work for the next year, finalizing COBIA phase 3, and getting the logging implemented. Working on some interface specifications, which is the native persistence interface for CAPE-OPEN. They're being used right now in version 1.2 of COBIA. We need to rewrite the parameter interface specification. The new parameter interfaces are also being used in COBIA. We just need to finalize the documentation for them. We're incorporating errata and clarifications into the identification. We also have a reporting interface that we need to finalize. We need to develop test cases for the specifications for the unit operation, or for the common interfaces, and then work on a common source documentation framework with unit and thermo SIGs. I believe Kyle's presenting on this. You haven't done that yet, right, Kyle?
Yes, that's tomorrow.
Upcoming. Okay, and then we're going to work with the other SIGs on interop and certification issues. And let's see, next slide. I think that's my last slide. So any questions on any of that? I know I kind of went through pretty quickly, so.
Thanks, Bill.
Yes. So.
Any
Questions?
questions? None from the online panel? Yes, there's one question from Malcolm at the back.
I've got 2 questions.
2 questions, excellent.
Take the second one first. There was no mention of RFCing the modified parameters in common interface on your to-do list.
Yeah, we've got it. We haven't finalized all the documentation for the new parameter interfaces. They're being used in COBIA, and they're being marshaled, or the COM interop right now is handling any translation of that to the existing 1.0, 1.1 parameter interfaces. So it's all kind of behind the scenes right now. This is kind of begging a question about, these interfaces are really going to become CAPE-OPEN 2.0, and we've not really been talking about that to a large extent. So I think that that's probably going to be something that's going to be coming up over the next year or so, and we're gonna have to really start working on that one. Okay. So
You've released Cobia based on an RFC new version of the interface. I don't think that is actually sustainable. It needs to be RFC ASAP.
yes, we do have some modifications to make to it. Hopefully we will get that out here within the next couple months. Things tend to take a little bit longer than we hope to get done, but we do have a version of it that has a handful of comments. We need to just go through, clean that up, and we'll get that out for RFC.
Excellent. It was just, it was not on your plan. So I think it needs to be on your plan. The second one, which I'll take second, the Cobia logging.
Yes.
I'm assuming that it can't log com interactions, so it's until everything is Cobia or there are no com interactions left, it doesn't actually help us, so you still need COLT. Can it log Cobia interactions?
Yes.
Or is it logging the Cobia to Combia interaction and not the Combia to com interaction?
Correct.
It
It is
can-
Cobia.
Yeah. Jasper, do you want to address that?
Well, I think Malcolm got it right the first time, so there's not much to address.
So it can only log Cobia to Combia interaction. If there's a problem between Combia and the com component, it can't log that.
No, but the design that we have chosen for the Cobia logging could have, or could in the future potentially also be applied to COM logging. We know now how to do on-the-fly binary function calls. If we were really interested in redoing COM logging, this is the better design.
Conversation with the interoperability SIG then, please, who is responsible for COLT.
Happy. There's one question from Sergey.
Yeah, Sergey.
Yes, I have a very technical question, but perhaps we are not the only company that have that issue. Namely, we have seldom the situation that the same CAPE-OPEN component is installed on a machine in different versions, and the different application needs to address either that or that version of CAPE-OPEN component. At the moment, our workaround is to re-register on the fly the CAPE-OPEN component so that the proper version of the component could be addressed too. But perhaps there is another way how to resolve this issue, how to address different versions of the same component on the machine, or what do you think about? Is it an issue for the community?
Yeah, I follow the issue for you, and I think we probably could do something around some guidelines on versioning of PMCs, make some kind of a general guidance for that. Because you're dealing with how is that vendor's PMC how does it's kind of his upgrade path on his PMC more than a CAPE-OPEN issue, right? But we can provide some guidelines for that and maybe help out with that. Like, if you're doing this type of a change, then you probably need to use a different CLS ID and for registering the newer version of it as opposed to the older version of it. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, right? You need two different class IDs for that earlier component, the newer component versus the earlier component, right?
Yeah.
And then you can have them both living side by side on the machine. So maybe there's something that can be done there as a statement. I don't know whether, does that belong to M&T? Does that belong to Interop, Malcolm?
That's sometimes easier said than done.
Yeah.
The software vendor decision really, whether
Yeah.
two versions of the package are different software components or the same is up to the software vendor to decide.
In Windows, you can only have one DLL with the same name, one DLL by name given, in a process loaded once. So if you have two DLLs with two different, with the same name, in two different folders from two different versions of the package, that's not gonna work.
But you can put the version number in the DLL
Maybe
name.
even some,
Yeah.
use it at the same time.
This is one of the problems that we dealt with the CAPE-OPEN versioning guidance document too, and why we ended up with where we did with where we decided a breaking change and needing a whole new version of something came about was because this type of an issue would come up from time to time with the CAPE-OPEN versioning as well, right, Jesper?
Yeah, there we have a strategy in place that if the PME and the PMC both support multiple CAPE-OPEN versions, there is a path for the PME and the PMC to agree on a newer version. So that update strategy is in place for future CAPE-OPEN releases.
Yeah, so I mean, we can put together some kind of a guidance if we need to. So, we'll talk about that within the SIG and see what we can come up with. And if one of the other SIGs wants to take leadership on that, that's good too. But I do recognize where you're coming from with the problem there. But I don't think we can do more than guidance at this point.
Okay,
So
thank you.
We have one more question from the room.
Yes,
Okay.
Maybe I missed that, but will you supply a functionality to rerun historic calculations just from the information in the log file? As a byproduct, that will give you an enormous number of test cases.
can you repeat Kyle or
Yes,
someone, can you
So
repeat the
producing a
question?
log file which actually contains all codes and all results. So can you provide a tool that you can rerun some calculation from the log file identically?
Jasper?
Isn't that simply a matter of saving the file that you solved in the first
I
place?
think it's pretty important. I implemented it in my engine, and whenever a user had a crash or anything, I just said, give me your log file. I could identically reproduce every call, every calculation, and had this problem. And I could use old log files to test new versions. So I think that's a very, very important thing, that a log file is not one direction. That you can also use a log file to rerun old calculations.
Okay, but to rerun the old calculation, you have to load the document in the simulator first. So that requires actually storing the document.
But everything is a log file, no?
Only CAPE-OPEN interactions. It's only logging the CAPE-OPEN interactions.
Correct.
Not the entire simulation.
No, but everything that comes from the simulation into CAPE-OPEN is in a log file. So you don't need the simulation. You're just putting what's in the log file into CAPE-OPEN. You have all that communication. You can reproduce any bug.
Oh, you're stating that you want a PME that reads the log file and exercises the PMC using the same data that the PME originally put in.
Very
This is a smart
important
idea.
tool. And it gives you a lot of test cases also.
Because we didn't think of this idea. This is exactly why we made the logging now an interface that if you think of this idea, you can implement it.
I think it's very minor. That's that.
But it requires two things. The first thing is possibly you need a certain sequence of calls to reproduce something. Because
But
maybe not.
But they just replay the log. In my own machine, I had every COM call with its parameters from the beginning of opening the COM. I had every calculation result coming back from the COM in the log. So it was very easy to just rerun that with the same parameters and compare the results to what's in the log.
Out of curiosity, what tool did you use to make that com log?
I wrote the whole com server in Fortran, it wasn't like.
So it's your own server that's doing logging.
Well,
Okay.
well,
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Actually, PSP that time.
It's a good idea, and no, that has not yet been on our planning. The only rendering of the log that we had in mind for now is writing an XML file. And you could write that tool even from the XML file itself. You could just read the XML file and
It should
run it.
be bidirectional. So if anybody runs your thermodynamic engine in some process simulation
Yeah.
and gets some crash or something, he can just redo it, switch on the logging, send to the log file.
Yeah, but this
He
is
can exactly reproduce what happens one after the other.
this is assuming that you're debugging the PMC, debugging the PME. That way it's also possible, but you need a dummy PMC that responds exactly like in the log.
But you get all the input from the log file. And when you make a new version, run like 100 or 200 log files from before.
I see.
Right.
They still run.
That's a good suggestion. Okay, I think we need to
That's regression.
continue this conversation at a later
Yeah.
stage, but
Well,
we have to.
I think this goes back to part of that building a community idea where we can get ideas like this to help understand what features are needed that might be future things to do with Cobia as well, right?
Yeah,
Something-
absolutely.
So,
Also
Okay.